Americans had always sought to expand the size of their nation, and throughout the 19th century, they extended their control toward the Pacific Ocean. However, by the 1880s, many American leaders had become convinced that the United States should join the imperialist powers of Europe and establish colonies overseas. Imperialism, which is the policy in which stronger nations extend their economic, political, or military control over weaker nations, was already a trend around the world. An earlier supporter of American expansionism was William Seward, Secretary of State under Presidents Abraham Lincoln and Andrew Johnson. In 1867, Seward arranged for the United States to buy Alaska from the Russians for $7.2 million. Seward had some trouble persuading the House of Representatives to approve funding for the purchase. Some people thought it was absolutely silly to buy what they called Seward's icebox, and they referred to it as Seward's Folly. Time showed how wrong they were. In 1959, Alaska became a state, and for about 2 cents an acre, the United States had acquired a land rich in timber, mineral, and oil. In 1867, the same year in which Alaska was purchased, the United States took over the Midway Islands, which lie in the Pacific Ocean about 1,300 miles north of Hawaii. No one lived on those islands, so the event didn't attract much attention. But Hawaii was another question. The Hawaiian Islands had been economically important to the United States for nearly a century. Since the 1790s, American merchants had been stopping on their way to China and East India. In the 1820s, Yankee missionaries founded Christian schools and churches on the island. Their children and grandchildren became sugar planters who sold most of their crop to the United States. The cry for annexation. In the mid-19th century, American-owned sugar plantations accounted for about 3/4 of the Hawaiian Islands' wealth. Plantation owners imported thousands of laborers from Japan, Portugal, and China, and by 1900, foreigners and immigrant laborers outnumbered native Hawaiians about 3-1. White planters profited from close ties with the United States, and in 1875, the United States agreed to import Hawaiian sugar duty-free. Over the next 15 years, Hawaiian sugar production increased 9 times. Then the McKinley Tariff of 1890 provoked a crisis by eliminating the duty-free status of Hawaiian sugar. As a result, Hawaiian sugar growers faced competition in the American market. American planters in Hawaii called for the United States to annex the islands so they wouldn't have to pay that duty. The United States military and economic leaders already understood the value of the islands. In 1887, they pressured Hawaii to allow the United States to build a naval base at Pearl Harbor, the kingdom's best port. The base became a refueling station for American ships. I think it's interesting to think about how policies and how decisions in history radically change a Native population and a Native population's culture and heritage. If you take a look at this chart, over the course of, 70 years, the Hawaiian population has really been decimated. And the policy of this immigrant labor coming into the country has created a situation in which Native Hawaiians are outnumbered vastly by others in their country. So, Of course, while all of this is going on, you've got Teddy Roosevelt as a Secretary of the Navy, pushing for the Great White Fleet to be created, the United States becoming more and more imperialist. You got King Cal, I call him on the left, and Sanford B. Dole on the right, the very first president of Hawaii, and the very last Queen Liliuokalani of Hawaii. And now we're going to talk about the end of a monarchy. So also in that same year, Hawaii's King Kalakokua, or King Cal, as I call him, had been strong-armed by white business leaders in Hawaii, and they forced him to amend Hawaii's constitution, effectively limiting voting rights to only wealthy landowners. But when King Kalakaua died, his sister, Queen Liliuokalani, came to power, and she had in the back of her mind Hawaii for Hawaiians, that agenda. She proposed removing the property-owning qualifications for voting. To prevent this from happening, business groups encouraged by Ambassador John L. Stevens organized a revolution against her. With the help of the U.S. Marines, they overthrew the Queen, set up a new government headed by Sanford B. Dole. President Cleveland directed the Queen be restored to her throne, but Dole refused to surrender his own power. Cleveland formally recognized the Republic of Hawaii, but he refused to consider annexation unless a majority of Hawaiians favored it. In 1897, though, William McKinley was president, and he favored annexation. He succeeded Cleveland as president, and on August 12th of 1898, Congress proclaimed Hawaii an American territory, and although Hawaiians had never had the chance to vote, in 1959, Hawaii became the 50th state of the United States. I want to introduce you to Rudyard Kipling. We're going to read a poem by Rudyard Kipling called White Man's Burden, and I want you to consider whether Rudyard is an imperialist or an anti-imperialist.